Why America and Iran keep bombing each other every 2 weeks. Here's something nobody's really saying out loud about what happened in the Gulf this week. This is not new, this is the third time in 3 weeks that the US has bombed nearly the same targets in Iran, after Iran did nearly the same thing to a tanker in the Strait of Hormuz. Same radar stations, same drone sites, same air defense systems over and over. And everyone's covering it like it's breaking news every single time. New headline, new day, same exact fight. So here's what I actually want to get into today. Not just what happened this week, because you can get that from any news site in 30 seconds. I want to show you the pattern underneath it. Why the specific loop, attack, retaliation, counter retaliation, brief calm, repeat, keeps happening on almost a 2 week cycle. What's actually driving it, and why by the end of this video you'll probably agree that calling this a ceasefire is being way too generous. Stick with me, because the reason why this keeps repeating is honestly more interesting than the strikes themselves. What actually happened? Okay, so let's actually get into the timeline, stripped of all the noise. This is the part that sets up everything else, so bear with me for a minute. For a few weeks now, we've technically been living under an interim ceasefire between the US and Iran, a fragile one, brokered after a pretty brutal stretch of direct conflict earlier this year. Emphasis on the word fragile, because it's been broken, patched, broken again, patched again on what feels like a bi-weekly schedule at this point. This time, 3 commercial ships got hit by projectiles in or near the Strait of Hormuz. We're talking a Qatari-owned LNG carrier that actually caught fire in its engine room, which, if you know anything about LNG tankers, is not the part of the ship you want catching fire. A Saudi-flagged supertanker and a third vessel hit shortly after. Nobody officially claimed responsibility, which by now is basically Iran's signature move. Iranian state media hinted at it. Qatar came out and directly said on the record, "We hold Iran fully responsible. Nobody's really buying the no comment." And this wasn't a one-off. This was, according to the people who actually track maritime traffic there, the busiest single day of attacks in that strait since back in the spring. So this is escalation, not an isolated incident. Now here's where it gets interesting. Just hours after those tanker strikes, the US didn't just retaliate militarily, they also pulled a financial lever. The Treasury Department revoked a license that had been letting Iran sell its oil more or less openly as part of the ceasefire arrangement. So in the span of one day, Iran lost both the ability to move ships safely through the Gulf and its legal path to selling oil. That's not a coincidence, that's a deliberate 1-2 punch. Then came the military response. US aircraft went after a pretty long list of targets: air defense systems, radar stations along the coast, command and control networks, drone storage sites, anti-ship missile batteries, and dozens of small IRGC fast boats that operate in and around the strait. The stated goal, according to Central Command, was straightforward: stop Iran's ability to keep hitting international shipping. And then, because apparently subtly left the chat months ago, Iran hit back within about 24 hours, this time going after American military installations in Bahrain and Kuwait. Iran's own claim is that they hit over 80 sites. The US count of what they themselves struck in Iran is also right around 80 targets. Make of that symmetry what you will. So that's the shape of it. Tanker attacks, sanctions yanked, airstrikes, counterstrikes, all inside about 48 hours. Same shape as the last time, and the time before that. Keep that in the back of your mind. We're coming back to it. Why the Strait of Hormuz actually matters. Now, if you're not glued to shipping news, you might be wondering why everyone loses their minds every single time something happens in this one specific stretch of water. So let's zoom out for a second. The Strait of Hormuz is this narrow choke point between Iran and Oman. At its tightest point, we're talking maybe 33 kilometers wide, with the actual usable shipping lanes being way narrower than that. And through that narrow gap flows something like a fifth of the entire world's traded oil and gas. Not a fifth of Middle Eastern oil, a fifth of global oil, plus a massive chunk of the world's LNG, liquefied natural gas, largely coming out of Qatar. There is no real alternative route. You can't just reroute a supertanker around the coast the way you would reroute a shipping container around a traffic jam. Some vessels have been trying to use a route hugging to Omani coastline to stay further from Iranian waters and, plot twist, that's exactly where a lot of these recent attacks have actually been happening, so even the workaround isn't safe anymore. This is why the moment those three tankers got hit, you saw oil prices jump past $76 a barrel. You saw bond yields move in Asia. You saw European gas prices climb something like 10% in just 2 days. This is the part people miss when they only think of this as a regional Middle East story. It's not. If the strait gets meaningfully disrupted for an extended period, that's a global inflation story. That's a why did my heating bill go up story. That's a central banks having emergency meetings story. And there's a geopolitical wrinkle here too. Iran has reportedly floated the idea at various points of prioritizing which country's ships get safe passage. Guess which country tends to come out ahead in that arrangement? China, which tells you a decent amount about who Iran sees as being in its corner right now versus who it's actively trying to squeeze. So when you hear attack in the Strait of Hormuz, don't file that under regional news. File it under things that touch literally everyone's wallet. The pattern nobody's naming. Okay, remember what I said at the top? This is the part where that comes back. This is not the first time this exact sequence has played out. This is apparently the third time in about 3 weeks that American aircraft had hit very similar targets after an Iranian drone or missile attack in the strait. Same category of sites: air defense, radar, command networks. And there's a real question worth asking here: how many of these targets are actually still standing by this point? Think about it logically. If you keep bombing someone's coastal radar installations and drone storage facilities every couple of weeks, at some point either they've rebuilt faster than anyone's accounting for, or, more likely, the target list is running thin. And what's actually getting hit each time is smaller, more mobile, or honestly just already rubble getting rebombed for the optics of "we responded." That matters because it tells you something about where this conflict actually sits right now. It's not looking like a war aimed at toppling anything or seizing territory. It looks much more like a cycle: provocation, retaliation, temporary calm, repeat, which is frankly exhausting for markets, exhausting for regional allies like Bahrain and Kuwait, who keep getting caught in the crossfire quite literally, and genuinely destabilizing for that interim deal everyone keeps referencing like it's some kind of stable foundation. It isn't. It's been broken and patched so many times that calling it a ceasefire at this point is almost generous. And on the diplomatic side, Trump's own public comments around this have been pretty telling. At one point, when directly asked why the US would strike back militarily while simultaneously insisting negotiations with Iran were progressing just fine, His answer was essentially, they're different, and then he moved on. That's not exactly the language of two sides on the verge of a durable agreement. That's the language of two sides that don't fully trust each other and are managing an ongoing low grade conflict rather than resolving one. Meanwhile, you've got voices inside Iran's own government, parliamentary security officials publicly framing these Iranian attacks as just ceasefire management, not a violation, which is a wild phrase if you sit with it for a second. It's basically saying, yes, we're shooting, but we've decided that doesn't count. So the honest read here: nobody involved actually believes the ceasefire is holding in any meaningful sense. Everyone's just choosing, for now, not to say that part out loud. That's the 2 week loop I promised you at the start: provocation, response, counter response, quiet, and then it starts again right on schedule. Where this realistically goes. Okay, so where does this head next? I want to give you a few realistic threads rather than a single prediction because frankly nobody knows for sure, including, I'd bet, most of the people making decisions on both sides right now. Thread 1: the economic pressure track. Pulling that oil sales license was a big move because it removes one of the few incentives Iran had to keep things calm: the idea that playing nice economically benefits people inside Iran's government who want a deal over people who want a fight. Take that incentive away and you've removed a moderating force. That's a real risk factor going forward. Threat 2: the shipping industry just adapts around the danger. This has actually already started. Even in the middle of this latest flare up, tankers were still transiting the strait, some cautiously, some rerouting mid journey, insurance premiums climbing. But the traffic hasn't stopped completely. Global trade has a weird resilience to it. It absorbs risk rather than halting for it, right up until the point where it can't anymore. Thread 3, and this is the one I'd actually watch closest, is whether this stays contained to Iran, Bahrain, and Kuwait, or whether it starts pulling in other players. Qatar's already directly pointing fingers at Iran over its LNG tanker. Saudi Arabia's tanker got hit too. If either of those two decides this is no longer something they can just absorb and condemn on Twitter, that's a much bigger regional story. And remember, this is all happening against the backdrop of a broader Middle East that's already extremely tense. You've got instability radiating out from multiple directions at once this year, not just this one flashpoint. Threat 4: attrition and fatigue. At some point, a cycle like this either escalates into something bigger and harder to walk back from, or it just fizzles, because both sides get tired of repeating the same 48-hour loop with diminishing returns and nobody clearly winning. Historically, that second option is actually more common than people expect. Wars of attrition without a clear decisive move tend to grind down rather than explode. But tends to is doing a lot of work in that sentence, and the tanker attacks are trending toward more frequent, not less. Okay, so quick recap now. Three tankers hit in the Strait of Hormuz. The US pulled Iran's oil sales license and then launched airstrikes on Iranian military infrastructure. Iran hit back at US bases in Bahrain and Kuwait within a day. And this was the third time this exact loop has played out in 3 weeks: attack, retaliation, counter retaliation, brief quiet, repeat. The bigger picture I want you to walk away with is this: the ceasefire framing everyone keeps using is doing a lot of heavy lifting for something that's been violated this many times in this short a window. Keep watching how often the specific loop repeats, because the frequency is honestly a better indicator of where this is heading than any single headline. Okay, that's it for today. See you in the next video.